It's all so tiring, isn't it? I'm out on it, man. I don't even fucking care. I don't even fucking care. If companies are gonna let this happen, if the corporations are gonna do nothing and they're just gonna bend the knee and let all of these freaks take them over and censor them and decide what they can and can't have in their games, I'm out. I'm not gonna buy any more. I've already been out not buying a whole bunch of them, but I'm about to be 1000% out. And if there's something I really, really want, and then I'm gonna end up just sailing the 7 seas, if you know what I mean. Collective Shout reveals insane plan to censor countless unethical games. Okay, go ahead, do that. Let that happen, corporations. Everything's gonna crash and burn.
Hey, what's up, guys? Rev here.
What's up,
So today we have
Rev?
another update regarding Collective Shout and their push to censor more video games they consider problematic.
Good. I hope they do it.
As always, you can help share this video around by liking, commenting, or subscribing to make yourself an engaged viewer so your view will actually count in YouTube's new busted system. Now,
Yeah, it's gonna go the same way as TV, where people are just gonna stop watching. They're gonna stop playing. People aren't watching TV like they used to. They're watching YouTube. They're watching Twitch. They're watching Kick. They're watching Tubi. Why would they watch anything else? It's all garbage. It's all censored. It's all trying to push a message.
Green tweet is something I showed only a few videos ago, but it's relevant once again. Would you look at that? Because in a recent interview, a member of Collective Shout has gone fully mask off. They have made their intentions very clear in regards to fictional content featured in video games that they are determining whether or not they are appropriate for gamers. They said they don't care if the content is legal or not. They are going to...
Yep, and there's the problem. And they're international. They're all over the world. It's not like it's an American thing. It's mostly coming out of Australia and France.
Be the
Collective Shout is straight up Australia.
Of truth, and they alone will decide if something should exist or not. And also on top of that, when it comes to the consequences of those games and their removal...
The consequences of removing these types of games is you're going to create a black market. You're going to create a secondary market, an alternative market, whatever you want to call it, where people are going to get their games and play them. Really? I think we shouldn't have shut down things like Newgrounds. I think we should have left it up. Newgrounds is still kind of technically up, but it's not running.
They don't care what happens to the player experience, and they don't care what happens to the developers financially. This tweet is relevant again. They care more about fictional content. They're treating fictional characters like real people and treating real people like fictional characters, and they're mad at you for knowing the difference. So, quick rundown of Collective Shout in case you've missed the previous episodes of this long saga here. Collective Shout, a small group of feminists in Australia. They have been snipping at the ankles of many different developers for years with no success.
Yeah, and they just recently decided, you know what? We believe in a lot of the things that you say, so we'll listen. We'll bend the knee. And it's because they have a lot of the same views.
But about 2 months ago, they switched up their strategy and now are going after payment processors like Visa and MasterCard and putting pressure on them to force...
Yep, because Visa and MasterCard have the same views.
Platforms like Steam to remove...
And then Steam was like, you know what? We'll comply because we don't want players to not be able to buy their games. Well, why don't you just set up with your own payment processor or another payment processor, or find a way around it and do something where you don't even have to mess with a payment processor, where you take some kind of other currency.
Move their games. This has been very successful, resulting in thousands of games being banned or in some way censored. Now, we've seen a lot of backlash to this movement, rightfully so, from gamers, and they have played the victim. Collective Shout has even gotten the support of the United Nations, who said this is the most serious form of online violence against women human rights defenders have seen in a long time. And you can see from this LinkedIn post, you have their supporters saying, I've been standing up to these cowards who clearly need their local police to check their hard drives. No one should want that content, and those that do need to be dealt with appropriately. Anyone who thinks it is mere censorship is definitely someone needing consequences. So yes, we're seeing this over and over again, even
Yeah, so they're saying if you don't agree with them, there needs to be consequences. If you don't want them to censor all the things that you like, then you will be put in jail. Or worse.
Members of Collective Shout vaguely threatening legal action against people. They are trying to silence and even put people in jail at this point. So what we have today is an interview from Jack Connor over at Tweaktown, and he interviewed a member of Collective Shout and really just asked the flat out important questions and got surprising answers. I think even he was surprised at their honesty, their foolish honesty, be it at that. But anyways, they interviewed Caitlin Roper, the campaigns manager at Collective Shout. And this is just the intro to the article, and they're just going through what Collective Shout does. We already know that, but this is the individual that they are interviewing, a feminist activist who's obviously, like I said, the campaigns manager at Collective Shout, not just the manager, but also an active member as well. And they've been trying very hard to push the goals of Collective Shout. And here's some of the really key answers they gave to Jack. So here's one question, straight to the point. What types of depictions of women in games do you believe are most harmful and how? And she says, the global research...
I'd like to know what they think isn't harmful, actually. I think that's the real hard-hitting question.
...has consistently found that depicting women as sexual objects, as things existing for someone else's arousal, is harmful and contributes to negative impacts.
But who's to decide what level that is? Who's to decide that? Because once upon a time, people thought that being able to see a woman's ankles was arousing. So it wasn't allowed. So, like, where are we drawing the line here?
Outlined earlier, but here the games we objected to went much further than sexist and objective.
A woman has to be masculine in the face and have unappealing features and have the body type of a refrigerator, be flat-chested and flat-assed. And then it's okay.
Objectifying representations of women, they glorified men's violence against women, portraying women as desiring and deserving.
Oh, but wait, no, you can't have a flat chest because it would be too close to being a child character. You can't have a child character.
Abuse. They depicted extreme violence and torture of women. I've been working in this space for 15 years, and I've encountered some pretty extreme material, and what I came across here was some of the worst I had ever come across. Now, you can see the vague language talking about material, this and that. They're talking about video games. They're not talking about any content featuring real women. They are talking about video games. They're talking about fictional content here. And they're trying to make this statement that global research has found this link, but they're not clarifying whether this is about fictional content or not, because I think they'd be very hard-pressed to find any support for those claims. So that's why they're being intentionally vague. Now, keep in mind, they're talking about this harmful...
Yeah, nobody can ever bring up these studies. Nobody can ever bring up any of these experts that they have. And they just all talk about it and act like that it's going on. And for some reason, there are people who are like, but they said, so it must be.
Content, creating these dangerous depictions of women and girls. They are a cutie supporter. As an organization, they collectively support cuties. In case you don't know, the Netflix film from a few years ago where it was about real girls around the ages of 11 and 12 doing a twerking competition. In fact,
yeah, they support pedophilia as long as it's pretending to fight against sexual predators. They support it as long as it's pretending to fight against actual pedophiles by sexualizing the children. It's crazy. Come on, man.
In fact, hundreds of young girls went through the audition process for this film, exploiting all of them. But they support the existence of that film, but are upset about...
Yeah, because they're lying, disgusting freaks who are operating by the hands of Satan.
Certain depictions in fictional content. Just making that abundantly clear. And also they say, you know, this extreme content, this is the same group that tried to get Detroit Become Human banned as well. And also have been responsible for getting horror games banned. So it goes way beyond what they're describing in a very vague sense.
You can't show a girl being scared or even mutilated. It's just fine if you show a man.
But here's another question. Are the concerns with video game content about the legality of the content, or are they primarily ethical/moral concerns? Now, I think we all had a strong feeling of what their answer was going to be here, but they make it very clear. So they talk about the problematic games they found will likely be illegal in Australia. Those were reported to the Australian Classifications Board, were geo-blocked because they had illegal and were being sold, or they were illegal and they were being sold illegally. The campaign calling on payment processors to stop processing payments on platforms hosting this content was also a call for them to enforce their own existing terms and conditions, which is very misleading because when Steam was targeted, for example, they added a rule that said now the content has to comply with payment processors. So they had to literally create a new rule on their platform because of the outrage coming from groups like Collective Shout. So they're being very misleading once again. But here's where they get it really, really clear. They say, however, regardless of the law, let me say that again, regardless of the law, the harms of glorifying violence against women and children are well established. And we would argue that any company acting ethically would not host or profit from this content.
And here's where the problem lies. They're not actively trying to censor old games. They want to do that, yeah. But they are doing more than that. They're going so far as to change the companies to not push the content out in the first place. We're going to keep it going with the characters that look like the weird, almost dude, could be a chick, could be a dude, I don't know for sure, perfect dark character. Or like intergalactic. That's the kind of characters that we're going to be pushing forward. You're going to see a whole lot more of them. It's going to get worse. It's going to get much worse. And let me tell you, there's going to be an actual crash. There's going to be an actual gaming crash, and it's coming very soon. We keep seeing mini crashes, micro crashes. We're going to see an actual big one, and this one's going to be worldwide this time, not just in America.
So all they have is an emotion-based plea, a demand based on what they deem ethical decision-making. That's what they're drawing all this from. It's not about legality. They probably found cases like they mentioned here with content being illegal in Australia, but Australia has crazy laws about fictional content.
I don't care what you do in Australia. You can censor all the games in Australia if you want. You can censor all of them in Germany if you want. I don't give a fuck. If you're affecting games in America, that's when we have some problems.
Particular, in fact, most anime and anything with adult content from anime is on paper banned in Australia. In fact, they have banned adult content featuring real adult women if they look young, which is a crazy thing that happened a few years ago. Literally like the face of consent, like you can be a full-grown adult, but if you look young, however they define that, they would consider that content illegal in Australia. So they're using the very, very draconian laws that involve censorship in Australia to basically be the entire global basis for legality, which, you know, what's stopping someone living in a Middle Eastern country from applying their law to people like Collective Shout and whether or not they would have a say in any of this stuff? Like, it wouldn't really work out too well for them, but they make it clear it's not about the law. They just want to decide what is ethical, what's not ethical, and they're going to be the arbiters of truth in that regard. And it's all very, very transparent, and that's how we end up with members of Collective Shout trying to frame characters like Annie, the new grok system on Twitter, as childlike or something that should be banned because they look at a busty, curvy anime girl and they start thinking about children being abused. And now you have to suffer because of their delusions and projection. But that's what we're working with here.
These freaks, they're done. They're cooked. Even if they succeed, all they're going to do is create a black market, and it's going to be even worse than they could ever imagine. That's the whole reason that Steam even was hosting porn games in the first place. If nobody could remember why they started doing that, It's because people were just going on to random websites and it was bad. There was a bunch of really bad games out there that people were getting access to, and Steam was like, all right, fine, we'll host it. Also, they made a lot of money.
Very unhinged people, but they continue on. So Jack asks, do you believe that people who engage with sexual content Collective Shout has advocated against are more likely to participate in it in real life? It's a pretty loaded question, but they say, based on the response to our campaign, men engaging in criminal threats to assault us, dox us, creating and distributing illegal image-based abuse content, sending us violent adult content and illegal CSAM. It is clear many of the men defending their R-word.
I don't believe you. Even if it is happening, I don't give a fuck. I still don't believe you. Yeah, you can say that all you want. But also, even if it is happening, yes, there are some crazy pieces of shit out there. We're gonna police all of the entire universe because there's some crazy pieces of shit out there? That's fucking stupid. The actual crazy people, how about we arrest them? How about we arrest those people? How about you go after those people that are sending you this stuff instead of trying to censor all the games? It's so fucking retarded, man. It's so easy to see what you're trying to do. You just want control. You want power.
Games perpetuate crimes of violence against women because they are doing it to us right now.
Yeah, go after those people then. They're not going to do that, though. They're just going to ignore it. They're going to take all of the stuff that these people are doing and they're going to show it to the world. Well, they're not even going to show it, actually. They're just going to take all this stuff and be like, see all of these things that these people are saying to us? These are gamers. All these gamers, they all think like this.
They're comparing what's happening in video games to their experience of getting targeted online. And we'll talk about these certain threats they're claiming they're receiving in just a second, but they continue on saying these men make it clear that these misogynistic attitudes required to engage in.
Yeah, I don't even believe that they're getting any of that.
And defend R-word games are not limited to fiction and video games, but that they will and do perpetuate abuse against actual women in the world. So they're using a sample size of Twitter users who are saying bad things to them as a entire representation of the male gender, and also saying, well, we have to punish all of you. Do you see how reaching that is? On top of that, two very key things. There are women who are very vocal against Collective Shout. They ignore that that's happening, but also, if anyone is consuming fictional content and then it's affecting them in real life, they have a mental illness. And we should not punish regular people who can separate fiction from reality for the actions of those who cannot, who should not be catered to when it comes to legally available fictional content. On top of that, there's been a lot of claims that Caitlyn in particular, the one that's being interviewed here, has been faking their own harassment. There was multiple burner accounts that they used as examples of them being harassed, accounts with 0 followers, and just
would have never seen that coming in a million years.
Actually created in the month of August during all this, and also based geographically in Australia. It seems like a lot of coincidences, and also the messages just seem so ridiculous that, yeah, some people have suspected that the harassment they're using to now punish all men is based on things they're creating themselves. That's the theory some people have. But here's another question saying, what would you say to those who have described this campaign and its impact as censorship? Now we're getting into a really crazy territory. So they say nobody has a human right to simulate and enact fantasies of assault and extreme violence against women. Now,
who's to say? Who's to say? Who's to police that? You? You decide that? I don't think so. I think that it is a human right to be able to do this. Because this is art. Are we gonna arrest somebody because they wrote some fan fiction and they posted it to some random website online? You're gonna arrest somebody because they wrote down something that's kind of like they drew a pair of titties and they put it in their file cabinet and the cops find it? Are they gonna be arrested for that and charged? Like, come the fuck on. Get the fuck out of here.
Not being able to access these R-word games from popular gaming platforms is a minor
Sure, but that's not the games you're going after.
inconvenience, not a violation of a person's rights. Payment processors get to determine if they do not want to host illegal content, including all of that stuff right
Yeah, except they went after games that weren't illegal,
which they had already determined. And so they should. I would ask those who view the loss of their R-word games as censorship to consider if they are concerned with.
And also, I don't think it should be up to the payment processors to decide to remove content or not host content that is illegal. It should be up to them to tell the authorities, not even up to them, they have to tell the authorities, do nothing about it except tell the authorities, and provide all of the available information that they can, and still do nothing, and let the investigation proceed as it should. It is not up to them to stop it. They are not the police. They are not law enforcement.
Women's basic human rights and the glorification of male violence against women. So again, they're trying to be intentionally vague here, mixing up fictional content with real life abuse, and they're trying to make connections that they can't really prove. On top of that, they are trying to police fantasy. So now, even if you have this fantasy, you're doing something wrong. If you have fantasies of anything dark or taboo, apparently they can do whatever they want to you because they determined whatever that is inappropriate and hurting people in their minds. So therefore, the payment processors can start determining whether or not this content should be allowed. And again, the way they describe what the payment processors are...
I bet these types of women read novels about romances between a dragon man and a woman. Like, I guarantee these types of people.
Determining whether or not
every time,
host, dude. They're talking about things in a way that seems like they're talking...
Just look at the woman's section in Barnes & Noble, or the fantasy section.
But real people being featured. When we're talking about legally available fictional content, video games, that they are now using their own country standards or their own ethics in some cases to say should not be allowed. But anyways, let's go to the next question related to that, saying, how do you distinguish between sexual content that is exploitative versus consensual fantasy? And they say, our objection is to content that glorified violence against women and children. As I reviewed the content tagged with these certain themes on Steam, I did not come across any that was intended as casual violence, but this is a common trope that women want to enjoy that stuff, when in reality the violence is deeply harmful. And then they say, critics argue this removes agency from women creating or consuming adult content. How do you reconcile protection with freedom of choice? And the Collective Shout employee says, there is no greater removal of a women's agency than R-wording. Media that glorifies violence against women harms all women regardless of whether a few women participate in its creation or consumption. It seems like right here they're completely misleading the point here. They're not talking about someone being victimized in real life. Again, this is in reference to these consensual fantasies featured in video games.
Yeah, you can't have bad things happen to anybody. Especially women, and especially women who are children. Cannot have it happen. And if you let them censor it like this, it's only going to get worse, because eventually they'll run out of things to censor, and they'll have to censor other things. And censor other things, and more things, and more things.
And they're also saying if women participate in the creation of this, they're also wrong as well, and they don't get a say in what they get to do, which is pretty ironic when we're talking about a loss of agency here. And you think about, that well-known fact that when it comes to hentai, for example, in Japan, the majority of artists are women. That is a fact. So you're basically saying anything that gets produced out of that features anything taboo or extreme in fictional settings, oh, well, they don't count because these women, they're siding with these men who are just wrong. It's a really big reach, to say the least. And again, roll it back here. They're saying that this media just cannot exist. But then they defend cuties featuring real children being exploited. Make it make sense, ladies and gentlemen. But
well, they can't make it make sense, because then everybody would know everything and it wouldn't be a war. It would just be how everything is, They have to have that fog. They have to be lying and manipulating, and you not quite know what they're after, what their goals are. I know what their goals are. We all know what their goals are. We can't get our eyes off it. We can't move our sight from it. That their true goal is just power and control.
Next question. What would you say to the thousands of developers who worked on these games that are currently legal and have suffered financial damages due to their game now being removed? And they say, really just in the highlighted parts, all you need to know, we are not responsible for or privy to the platform's processes, and we stand by our call to payment processors not to process payments on platforms knowingly hosting and profiting from R-word games. Now, we're, again, talking about fictional content that's legal in most places, but we're also talking about games that they have banned that include horror games. They have facilitated the ban of games that don't even feature the thing that they're using as the only justification to go in there.
They're lying.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, and really, you know who controls everything? Old people. You know who is controlling this? Old people. You know who don't play games? Old people. You know who don't like games and think that the computers are scary? Old people. So yeah, this isn't looking good. And it's not going to look good for a very long time. And it's going to get worse. And I think that they're going to succeed for the most part, for now, in censoring a lot of the games. Because I think a lot of these big, giant companies are going to be worried that they could be bullied off of platforms. And they're just going to release safe games.
Here, it is such a blatant deflection of what's actually going on here. And they're trying to gaslight you into thinking this is all about something featuring extreme content. And again, just very vague language. And that is on purpose. They care more about protecting fictional characters than they do, not just for the experience of gamers, but for the developers making them. They don't care if they lose money, if they have financial hardships because they decided their game shouldn't be allowed ethically. Do you not see the crazy dichotomy here? They care more about fictional characters than real people, as long as it serves their narrative and their beliefs.
Yeah, because they're saying that all of these things that are happening in fiction are just making people do it in real life, which is not happening. That's not how that works.
That's why Collective Shout and groups like them are
crazy people are going to be crazy people whether or not they play the video games.
So dangerous. They can't just look at something they don't like in fiction and say, that's not for me. I find it disgusting, whatever. But I'm just going to ignore it. No, they dig into the bowels of places like Steam, trying to find anything that upsets them morally, and they don't just look away. They look right at it and say, that has to go. Nobody should be able to have that. That's the issue here. That's why people are so strongly against Collective Shout. They should not be the arbiters of truth in what's allowed and what's ethical or legal or what have.
Yeah, and they just like randomly popped up out of Australia one day. Just came out of nowhere and just decided that they were going to change everything. Like, fuck you.
And there's another question, this time shifting it to violent video games. So they say violent content games where players massacre people is sold without issue, but sexual content is being targeted. What do you think about sexuality, particularly involving women, draws more scrutiny than violence? And they say, I'm not sure that I agree that violent content is sold without issue. It most certainly is at this point. There's been a lot of attempts to get rid of violent content. They have failed. They were something that were laughed at, or at least in hindsight, movements that are now laughed at, like Jack Thompson, for example, trying to get GTA banned. We look back now and think that guy's an absolute clown. But anyways, they say there has been a discussion about violence in media and video games and a connection to real-world violence. However, Collective Shout's work focuses on sexual objectification, exploitation of women and girls, and how media, advertising, and popular culture can contribute to this, normalize, justify, or even trivialize it. The reality is that an alarming number of women and girls experience violence.
If you don't like it, create your own shit. That's what I gotta say about it. Make your own platform and don't allow all that shit on it. See how it goes.
And abuse by men, and this is the cultural context in which this violence occurs, a culture that routinely portrays women as sexualized, objectified bodies for men's use in entertainment.
Yeah, they don't know how to create culture, so they have to police it. That's how these people operate.
And which normalizes, excuses, and glorifies.
They
so
suck.
Again, they're focusing on the mentally ill people who see something in media and fiction and go, oh, that means I can do that in real life. They are mentally ill. We're not going to cater to people like that who can't separate fiction from reality. But they ask another question saying, if advocating for the removal of these games is based on grounds that they are illegal, would you and Collective Shout agree that the removal of games depicting murder and any other illegal activities? And they say, again, our work focuses on combating sexual objectification. They basically say that, well, we're focusing on our little corner here of concerns, but it's a good point that they raised in the question. Like, if you are worried about abuse, violence of any form being replicated in real life based on fantasies depicted in video games, why are you stopping at one?
Yeah, it doesn't happen. I have never seen somebody go on a zombie killing spree because they played Resident Evil. You know? I've never seen somebody go just like light people on fire in the streets because they could do that in GTA. Never seen that happen. Definitely that happens, but not because they play GTA. It's just because somebody's crazy and wants to light somebody on fire.
Point, but not extending it to violence in general. Like, if there's a game you can go around harming women in a non-sexual way, just physically hurting them.
I'm playing Sleeping Dogs right now on my gaming channel, and like, when I'm beating up a whole bunch of people in the streets, I'm not gonna go out and do that in real life, and nobody else is either. Not gonna go out and do that just because they played Sleeping Dogs. Like, come on. These people are not real. These people are fake as fuck, and they're just after power and control.
Explain to me why that harm is not something of their concern. It's weird. It seems like they're
because it's not going to allow them to have more power. That's why.
Afraid to go after big targets, especially now. I mean, they have a very good time bullying a bunch of small indie developers who might be a one-man team, but will they be able to succeed over the big giants of the industry, particularly ones that have violent content? I think that's why they're holding their punches on that.
They're only going to get the companies that have similar views as them. And you're going to get a whole bunch of people in those companies that even if the company doesn't have those views, the people in the company does. And they like Collective Shout, and they like Sweet Baby Inc., and they like Embracer Group, and all of these other fucking companies that are disgusting trying to censor video games.
But there'll be some follow-up saying, if not, how does Collective Shout distinguish between which crimes are acceptable to include in publicly accessible media? And
they judge it by feelings. If they feel bad, then it's got to go.
Which aren't. They say, please refer to previous answers. Should payment processors like Visa and MasterCard be capable of drawing a line between what transactions are approved and what are blocked, even if the content of that transaction is technically legal? Should the same standards apply to films, comics, or books depicting similar themes? And they say again, please refer to previous answers that do not actually give any sort of an answer on the topic.
Yeah, because they don't give a shit.
Violence in video games, or the fact that payment processors, should these standards be applied to everything? Because I guarantee a lot of books that are being sold in stores that target women, for example, I'm sure they have a lot of very dark themes. Like, it's kind of a meme at this point, but yeah, go to like Barnes and Noble and like go.
Yeah, there's a lot of woman and beast stuff going on at Barnes and Noble. That's actually most of it.
Like the women's fantasy section, right? And it's going to have a lot of dark themes that Collective Shout would normally care about, but I guarantee they will never cross into that realm for reasons that are very obvious.
Yeah, like a woman and a giant billionaire wolf man.
But for now, that's going to do. It's going to do for this update on Collective Shout. I know it's a little bit of a long one, but yeah, it was a pretty interesting interview. They've gone mask off. They can't separate fiction from reality, and they're going to punish you for knowing the difference. But anyways, that's going to do for this video. As always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below.
Yep, fuck all these people, man. And fuck the whole gaming industry. They keep doing shit that I don't like. And I'm just out. I'm just completely out. I'm just playing all the old games. I don't give a shit anymore. Like, I'm not even excited for anything new coming out. Except for Resident Evil 9. I'm definitely going to be getting that one. But other than that, man, I can't think of shit. There ain't nothing coming out that I want. Fuck them. I'm going to play Evil Within after I get done with Sleeping Dogs. Like, comment, subscribe. Ring the bell for all the notifications. See you in the next one.